Hey everyone, this is going to be a comprehensive follow-along tutorial on how you can use ChatGPT. ChatGPT was released almost a year ago, which has given the technology time to mature and settle, and has given us a lot more insight into how to use it most effectively now versus a year ago when it was super hyped up, but we didn't really know too much about it yet. Once you finish this video, you'll be an expert at using ChatGPT, and you'll be able to leverage this very powerful tool in various aspects of your life. In my experience, the best way to learn is by doing. So I would highly recommend both, watching this video from start to finish, and maybe even more importantly, pulling out your laptop or computer and following along with the exact same steps that I'm going to be taking in this video. We'll first start with creating an account, then navigating through the various parts of the ChatGPT interface. Then we'll move on to the various types of prompts you can sort of start with, and then we'll move on to where ChatGPT gets really powerful, which is this concept known as personas. Let's dive in. Okay, so the very first thing you're going to want to do is create an account. If you've already done this, you can skip to the next part of this video where we start explaining everything in the ChatGPT interface, but for those of you who haven't, we'll start right at the beginning. To create an account, we're going to want to go to the ChatGPT website, so we'll open up any internet browser. I use Google Chrome, but you can use any other browser like Firefox, Safari, or Microsoft Edge as well. ChatGPT's website is chat.openai.com, so let's type that into the URL box and hit enter. Okay, so we've gotten to the website and we have the option to either log in or sign up. We're going to want to sign up, so let's click on that. We have a few different options for how to create an account. You can either enter your email address, or you can sign in with your Google, Microsoft, or Apple accounts. If you want to go down the email path, you just type in your email address, hit continue, and you'll get a verification email sent to your email inbox. You then open your email inbox, which in my case is Gmail, and the email you will get it'll look something like this. Click on the button to verify your email address and you'll be ready to go. If you're having any trouble accessing the dashboard at this point, just go to chat.openai.com and this time click on log in instead of sign up. And you can enter in whichever way you use to sign up, whether that's your email, like manually entering your email, or using the Google, Microsoft, or Apple accounts like you were able to do previously. Great, so we do that, and now we're at the dashboard. Let's walk through what all we see here. On the left, we have both the option to start a new chat, as well as our history of chats that we've had on the website. For those of you who are doing this for the first time, there won't be anything here for now, but as soon as we start our first conversation in ChatGPT, you'll have that conversation appear here, and you can go back and read through it whenever you want to in the future. If you've used any sort of messaging app before, like texting, WhatsApp, or Facebook Messenger, for example, you can think of each of these conversations like each of the conversations you have with different friends and family in your messaging app, where each conversation in ChatGPT is like having a conversation with a different person, if that makes sense. In the bottom left, you have the option to adjust any settings for your account or add custom instructions. For now, we won't click on either of those because I think it's important to go through other parts of the application first, but we'll get back to them later in this video. At the very top, you have the option to choose the model that ChatGPT uses when you interact with it. You can kind of think of this as different versions of ChatGPT, where a higher number means you have a more up-to-date and advanced version. The default model is 3.5, which is the one we'll be using for this tutorial, but you can also sign up for 4 if you'd like, which requires you to sign up for $20 a month for a subscription, and also limits you to 25 messages every 3 hours. I think 3.5 is perfect for the vast majority of people, myself included, but you're definitely welcome to go ahead and get a Plus account to use GPT-4 if you would like. In this section at the bottom, there are a few example prompts that ChatGPT suggests if you're just getting started. So you can ask it to, for example, explain the concept of nostalgia to a kindergartner. And right below that, we can send a new message, which is where you'd be taken if you clicked on new chat in the upper left-hand corner here. Before we dive in and start a new conversation, I think there's some important information to be aware of. The first is how ChatGPT uses your data. By default, ChatGPT saves your chat history and uses those chats to improve ChatGPT itself. You can disable this by going to your settings, clicking on data controls, and then clicking on the toggle button next to chat history and training. But just know by doing so, you won't be able to access your past conversations on any device, whether that's the computer you're using right now, or your phone, or something else. I'm personally going to leave this toggled on my end, but you're welcome to disable this if you would like. The next thing to know is that not every answer that ChatGPT gives is going to be correct. If you look at the bottom of the screen, it says ChatGPT may produce inaccurate information about people, places, or facts. This is just something to keep in mind, that it's going to be important to not completely trust what ChatGPT says, and to make sure to fact check any information if you want to rely on it. Kind of in the same way if, like Google Maps, for whatever reason, tells you to go straight, but the road is ended, you would take a turn instead of just going straight. The final bit of important information is that ChatGPT only has knowledge of things that happened up until September of 2021. So it won't know about anything that has happened after that date, like who won the FIFA Women's World Cup in 2023, for example. You don't even have to take my word for it. You can try it out for yourself as we start our first chat now. So let's go to the bottom here and type, who won the FIFA Women's World Cup in 2023? Your answer will probably look similar, if not exactly the same as mine, where the answer says, I'm sorry, but I don't have access to real-time information, as my knowledge only goes up until September 2021. To find out the winner here, I recommend going elsewhere for the most up-to-date information. Great, now let's get started with some more fun parts of this tutorial, which is going through some of the different types of prompts we can start conversations with. We'll start off with the most basic type of prompts and then dive deeper into more advanced topics. The first we're going to do is ask ChatGPT easy questions to get answers about specific facts. This might be something you're familiar with doing through search engines like Google. We'll start off with something like, what was the first movie that Christopher Nolan made? ChatGPT will give us an answer which tells us that Christopher Nolan's first movie was a movie called Following, which was released in 1998. Before we read any further into the answer, I think we can talk about part of what makes ChatGPT so interesting and how we can improve on what we've done here so far. So like I said earlier, we started with asking ChatGPT a fact, right? Which is something we could have done with something like Google and gotten the answer fairly quickly. But like the name, ChatGPT, like that name suggests, you're having a chat with what you can think of as an imaginary person. So instead of, making a search and clicking on different links to visit different websites and find your answer, you're just having a conversation with that imaginary person. Reading through ChatGPT's response, I could see myself thinking, oh shoot, I actually really like going into movies without any information about the movie at all. This answer is starting to feel a bit like a spoiler to me. So I can go to ChatGPT and respond and say, I actually don't want to know anything about this movie besides its name. Could you give me an answer without all that extra information? And ChatGPT comes back to me and, clearly respects my answer, respects my concern here, and gives me an answer with just the name of the movie. It takes a bit of getting used to, but using ChatGPT requires a pretty fundamental shift in your brain about how you think about technology. We've been so trained to do things in certain ways, like for Google, thinking about keywords when you make a search, or, how I am now trained to right-click in, many different tools on a computer to bring up more options. With ChatGPT, it's kind of best to, really think of it like another person. This is a conversation. I even used an exclamation mark, in my second message here, which I don't think I've ever done in all my years of using Google or really anything online. You might have noticed as we went through this first conversation with ChatGPT that a few things appeared on our screen as we were doing so. First off is, like we said would happen earlier, this conversation is now appears on the left-hand side of our screen and is now part of our chat history. If we want to, we can log into ChatGPT at some future date and come back to this old conversation and read it. ChatGPT also tries to give the conversation a reasonable name, so when we see it later, we know what the conversation might be about without having to click on it. In this case, it came up with the title Nolan's First Movie which I think is pretty good. If we want to change it, we can tap on this edit icon here and then write something else, like Christopher Nolan's first film. I also won't do this now, but we could delete the conversation if we'd like by clicking on the trash icon here. Within the conversation itself, for the answers that ChatGPT gives, you can essentially vote on the answer to give ChatGPT information about whether the answer was good or not. And they will use that answer or use that information to further train the technology to hopefully get better and better at giving answers in the future. You can also copy the answer to your clipboard by clicking on this icon right here, which does the same thing as if you'd highlighted all the text, right-clicked on your mouse, and clicked on copy. There's a couple other things on screen, like this regenerate button in the bottom right-hand part of my screen, but let's actually talk about that after learning more about ChatGPT and experimenting with more advanced prompts. We're actually going to lean into that fundamental mind shift we were talking about earlier when we were talking about treating ChatGPT like another person, which is where things start getting, more interesting and more exciting. In this case, let's think of ChatGPT like a friend of ours. What's something I commonly go to my friends for? Well, a pretty common one is recommendations, like movies, books, places to visit, or even ideas for different hobbies to try out. And this is something ChatGPT is quite good at. So let's go ahead and start a new chat for this one, because we're talking about something different than Christopher Nolan's first movie. And let's try asking it for a recommendation. Let's say I have some vacation days saved up from work, but I'm not quite sure where to go. I also know that I want to go in December, and I don't really like the cold, so let's give all that information to ChatGPT the same way I'd give it to a friend if I were talking to them. Let's see, I'd like to go on a vacation in December, but I'm not really sure where to go. Could you suggest some places that won't be too cold? All right, here it goes at generating an answer, and it's come up with a lot of recommendations for vacation places that seem pretty solid. If for whatever reason you don't like the answer that ChatGPT has given, you can hit the regenerate button, which will make it go ahead and give you a new answer to the same question, and that answer is most likely going to look different from the first answer that you were given. As you can see when doing this, there's this 2 out of 2 that appeared in the top left. That's because this is now 2 divergent conversations that started out at the same point. So we started at that same initial question of warm vacation places, and can toggle between the 2 different answers that ChatGPT gave us. And if we wanted to, we could decide to take those 2 conversations, those 2 different threads in different directions. Let's now go ahead and go through a different example for recommendations, just to see more of what ChatGPT is capable of. So what's something else I'd ask a friend of mine for help with? Let's see. It's pretty common when meeting up with friends to end up spending money, whether that's going to a restaurant or a bar for food and drinks, or going to a concert even. Okay, let's see. What are some less common activities I could do with a group of my friends without spending money? All right, let's see what it says here. Yeah, okay, some of these are pretty interesting. I'm not sure if I would have thought of a photography scavenger hunt. That's actually, I think, a pretty great idea that I might have to save in mind for later. Next, we'll change gears from recommendations to long-form writing. You can think of these as things like emails, articles, or essays. One example we could try out here is an email. So let's go with write me an email that I could send to a professor named Miss Foster, who studies the history of wine, politely asking them if I could meet them to talk about their research. All right, looks like ChatGPT has given us a decent answer here, but this is pretty long for an email, so let's ask for this to be shorter. This feels a bit long to me. Can you make it shorter? Great. We could also go with something fun, like write a message to someone named Vishal, telling them how much you really enjoyed his tutorial on ChatGPT. Okay, ChatGPT by default really likes being a little on the little long, the little verbose side, but I'd probably still appreciate receiving a message like this regardless. As a side note, if you'd like to send something like this, my way, please feel free. We've touched on this a bit, but ChatGPT can also be used to edit writing. We've asked ChatGPT to edit its answers already, like in that email example, we asked it to make the email a little shorter, but we can also supply ChatGPT with our own text and get it to change that. So let's take an email that I've written that I want ChatGPT to make better. Okay, so here is an email that I've written. Hi Ashish, thank you for the job offer. I'm going to decline though. Thanks, Vishal. Could you make this just a little bit longer and sound nicer? Okay. Honestly, yeah, this is pretty good. I was able to take an email that to me felt, maybe a little rude and made it, I think, much better. One more subcategory within writing is summarizing writing. I'm not sure if SparkNotes or CliffsNotes are still popular today, but these were both really popular resources when I was growing up for summarizing books we read in English class. The interesting thing with ChatGPT is supplying your own custom text on demand and asking it to summarize that text for you. So I can paste in this article here that I maybe don't have the time to spend reading, and ChatGPT can give me a quick rundown. Could you summarize this article in just one paragraph? Cool. Let's see. Yeah, I can read this in just a few seconds, maybe a minute, and know what the article is about. For what it's worth, I think there's still definitely value in reading articles in their full form, but this is still a useful tool, a useful technique to have in your belt for later usage. The final type of prompt before we get into the idea of personas that I mentioned earlier is going to be instructions. ChatGPT is great at telling you step by step what to do for whatever you want, whether that's coming up with a recipe or figuring out a workout for you, etc. So let's start with recipes. I have extra spinach in my fridge that I want to use up. Could you suggest a recipe for me that uses a lot of spinach? Okay, it looks like it came up with a spinach chicken dish, which definitely uses up a fair amount of spinach. We could also try the workout example, so let's go with, could you give me a workout I could do at home? The only equipment I have is resistance bands. I could probably get ChatGPT to tweak this just a bit and maybe add a bit more specifics, but this seems like a pretty solid start for what feels like a comprehensive full body workout. So far, we've been treating the imaginary person we're talking to as sort of this generic person who knows everything. But if you think about any real person like you or me or your friends or your family members or celebrities or really anyone out there, they have particular personality traits and communication styles and strengths and areas of expertise. As an example for myself, I cook a lot, and I think I'm particularly good at different techniques when it comes to cooking Indian food. So if you ask me for really detailed instructions on how to cook a particular dish, I can do that for you. I also have certain friends who know a lot about wine, for example, and I turn to those people for suggestions about, which wine to pair with certain types of food. I also have other friends who are great at fishing, and I would turn to them for suggestions about where to go, what time I should go, how well I could expect to do, my first time going out, etc. The point is, everyone's an expert at different skills and parts of life. And when you're faced with a situation that someone you know is particularly well suited to help with, you'd obviously turn to that person rather than someone with no experience, right? Well, we can apply some of that same sort of thinking to ChatGPT and ask it to take on different personas, which is what really helps unleash ChatGPT's true potential. Let's go through, a bunch of different examples here. Okay, let's see. You are a movie critic. Could you give me a passionate argument for why Nicolas Cage is the best actor of the past 50 years? Okay. Now, this answer that ChatGPT is giving isn't just some sort of generic writing that I think maybe someone like me, who is not a movie critic, would write. Instead, I think it most closely mirrors what I would expect to see from an article or an interview from a real person who, has this type of job as a critic. Let's take this example a little further and see what our movie critic can do with, let's see, how does Michael Caine compare to him? Him, being Nicolas Cage. Nice, I think I'm already pretty convinced by the first sentence in this paragraph. I think this, sounds pretty close to the real deal. We're already talking about actors, so we can use an acting analogy to describe what ChatGPT is doing here. An actor really immerses themselves in a role, right? And convinces you that they are that person you see on screen, as opposed to, what that actor or actress is actually like in real life. So we can see a movie like The Dark Knight, where Heath Ledger is very much convincing, terrifyingly so, as the character Joker. In a very similar way, we're giving ChatGPT that training and preparation that an actor gets, so it can convincingly play whatever role we tell it to play. Let's go through a few more examples here. You are a retired professional basketball player. Could you give me some advice on how I should work on drop steps? So with this question, I'm getting pretty highly specific. I want advice for a more nuanced part of the sport, which in this case is generally a move you would use to get past a defender and get a more wide open shot on the basket. Of course, this isn't a perfect replacement for if I was, able to get a true retired NBA player in front of me giving advice, but I think some of the stuff in here is pretty good, especially if I'm someone who wants to improve, but doesn't necessarily have some of the normal resources to make that happen. Let's see. One more example we can go through here. You are a wedding planner. What are some of the more unnecessary expenses that I might be able to avoid? Weddings are super expensive. I've definitely heard horror stories from friends about going, tens of thousands of dollars over budget. So this advice is pretty nice to hear, like avoiding special linens for decoration as an example. The point is, you can get ChatGPT to adapt to whatever task you're trying to get accomplished. And you can get yourself a much more finely tuned answer by giving ChatGPT the identity of someone who is qualified to answer your question. The makers of ChatGPT themselves recognize the importance of personas and have actually made that concept easier to work with through a feature called custom instructions, which you might remember us mentioning briefly at the start of this video. To get to custom instructions, you go to the bottom left of your screen, click on the three dots, and click on the item in the pop-up menu that says custom instructions. You're then presented with two questions. What would you like ChatGPT to know about you to provide better responses? And how would you like ChatGPT to respond? Your answers to these questions will then apply to every chat you have with ChatGPT, so you don't have to start every chat in a potentially similar way. Let's go through an example of how we could use this. For the first question, I could say, I'm a software engineer, and all the code I write is in Java. For the second question, I could say, I care more about the reasoning behind the code than the code itself. Please give me long explanations every time I ask questions that have code in the answer. With this, we've pushed ChatGPT to put itself in this, in this frame of mind for all questions relating to software. So fairly similar to what we were doing with personas earlier. Once we hit save, this will apply to every question going forward, unless we come back to, this setting and delete our answers. We can also change this setting if we'd like, so I could come back and give an entirely new framing. So for that first question, I could say, for example, I am vegetarian. And for the second, I could say, when I ask for help with food, please ensure that any suggestions are vegetarian. I also like having lots of leftovers, so I prefer recipes that are easy to cook in bulk. Let's hit save, and then ask a question to test this out. Let's try to throw it, a bit of a curveball, so we'll ask it a question about sushi, which normally has fish, but we'll see if we're able to get vegetarian suggestions instead. Okay, so I want to make sushi for lunch. I have all the kitchen equipment needed. What should I get from the store? Nice. Okay, we see right from the beginning ChatGPT knows to suggest vegetarian sushi, which is pretty cool. I might follow up and ask it for instructions to make specific kind of rolls, like cucumber roll or something. But otherwise, this is clearly on the right track. Alright, that about brings us to the end here. Hopefully you found this video helpful, and now you're much more able to take advantage of ChatGPT moving forward. It's clearly, a powerful tool, and we're still in the early stages as a society of figuring out how best to use it. Hopefully, this video gets you at least one step ahead in that discovery journey. If any of this is unclear, or if you have any questions, please feel free to drop a comment down below, and I'll do my best to provide any clarification or help that I can. Last but not least, if you enjoyed this video and are feeling generous, go ahead and give it a like, and if you would like to see more things from me, please feel free to go ahead and subscribe to this channel. See you on the next one.